In 1972, an inspector arrived at a small farm in Ohio and told the family their outhouse was a code violation. Their hand-dug well needed certification, and the rainwater barrels they had used for decades fell under new state regulations. The farmer listened politely. Then, after the inspector drove off, he went right back to using all three exactly as his father and grandfather had before him. He understood something that the rule writers either could not or would not see, that the methods his family had used for 100 years had never made anyone sick, never failed, and cost almost nothing to maintain. The regulations had not been written for safety. They had been written for somebody else's benefit. Here is the part that doesn't get said. A surprising amount of what your grandparents did to live independently has been quietly regulated into a gray zone over the past several decades. Not because the methods were dangerous, but because they competed with industries and utilities that needed your dependence to thrive. Number 7 on this list was once standard equipment on every American farm. Number 2 is now legal in only a handful of states despite being safer than what replaced it. These 10 tricks weren't lost because they failed. They were pushed aside by a wave of codes, ordinances, and regulations that made the old self-reliant way of life difficult or impossible in many places, while the dependent way of life became the default. Your grandparents knew how to live without the grid, the company, and the bill, and that knowledge is too valuable to lose. Before we start, hit subscribe, because this is American history vanishing in real time. What you are about to learn was once simply normal. Let us count down. And always check the laws where you live, since the rules vary state by state. Number 10. Catching the rain that falls on your roof. The most basic act of water independence is collecting the rain that lands on your own roof, and your grandfather did it without asking anyone's permission. A single inch of rain on 1,000 square feet of roof delivers over 600 gallons of water, and a network of gutters and barrels caught nearly all of it for the garden, the livestock, and household use. The simple first flush diverter let the first dirty runoff bypass the tank before clean water flowed in. For decades, several Western states technically restricted this practice on the strange grounds of water rights law, though most have now quietly legalized it because the method works and always has. Your grandfather never waited for permission. Number 9. The hand-dug well and the hand pump. Before licensed well drillers and the regulations that followed them, your grandfather dug his own well by hand, lined the shaft with stone or brick, and set a hand pump that delivered clean water without any electricity at all. A properly built shallow well reached the groundwater that no drought could fully empty, and the hand pump worked as long as someone's arm did. The skill was real but learnable, and the well belonged entirely to the family that dug it. Most counties now require licensed contractors for new wells, but the technique survived in records and in a few communities that never let it go. Number 8. The compost toilet and the outhouse. First pattern break. Before universal sewer connection, the outhouse was standard, and a properly sited and maintained privy produced no pollution, used no water, and cost nothing to run. The composting toilet takes this even further, turning human waste into safeguarding compost through thermophilic decomposition, a process well documented in scientific literature. Local codes in most places require connection to a sewer or approved septic, but several states have created permit pathways for modern composting systems. The underlying principle your grandparents understood, that human waste is a resource rather than a hazard, is sound public health that the regulations were slow to recognize. Number 7. Graywater to the garden. The water from washing dishes, hands, and laundry, with its bit of soap and food residue, is called graywater, and it is safe to send straight to the garden where the fruit trees and the vegetables never complained about where the water came from. Your grandparents often ran a simple pipe out to the yard and let the household water do double duty. Federal and many state regulations long lumped gray water in with sewage, requiring it all go to the sewer system. Arizona and California led the way in legalizing simple graywater systems, and the technique your grandfather used, a three-way valve and a perforated pipe, is now legal in most Western states when done correctly. Number 6. Backyard chickens for eggs. In 1940, almost every American family with a yard kept chickens, and your grandmother gathered eggs each morning from a small flock that also ate kitchen scraps, controlled insects, and produced fertilizer for the garden. The system was closed, elegant, and almost free. Then zoning laws across most American cities banned livestock in town through the middle of the 20th century, driven by complaints in genuinely dense neighborhoods, but applied with a broad brush that swept up suburbs where it made no sense. Hundreds of American cities have since reversed those rules and now allow small backyard flocks, and the eggs from your own hens are noticeably better than anything from a store. Number 5. Raw milk from your own cow or your neighbor's. Second pattern break. Raw milk regulation is the clearest case of regulatory capture in American food history. The dairy lobby pushed hard through the 20th century for restrictions on raw milk sales, and the FDA banned interstate sale outright. The stated reason was pathogen risk, but the actual driver was the elimination of small competitors. Studies from Europe consistently show that children raised on raw milk from healthy cows have lower rates of asthma and allergies than those drinking pasteurized milk. Most states now allow raw milk in some form, often through herd share arrangements, but the restrictions remain a tangle, and the knowledge of safe small-scale dairying nearly went with them. Number 4. Slaughtering your own livestock at home. Your grandfather slaughtered his own hogs every November, fed the neighborhood, and wasted nothing of the animal. Municipal ordinances began banning backyard slaughter in the mid-20th century, ostensibly for sanitation, while commercial slaughterhouses with genuinely worse conditions got a pass. The laws targeted the small producers who competed with industrial meat packers. The technique your grandfather used was actually the most humane and sanitary method available, and many states still permit small-scale personal use slaughter on your own property. Check the rules where you live, because the knowledge of safe home butchering is worth preserving. Number 3. The home wood stove and the woodlot. Third pattern break. For most of American history, families heated and cooked with wood from their own land or nearby woodlots, and the wood stove was the heart of the kitchen. Modern building codes, air quality regulations, and EPA emission standards have steadily tightened around wood-burning appliances, and some areas have banned new installations entirely. The intent is air quality, which is real, but the effect is a steady reduction in the household's ability to heat and cook without depending on a fuel that comes from elsewhere. Your grandfather's woodlot gave him independence that no utility could touch, and the skill of managing a small woodlot is still legal and still worth learning. Number 2. Distilling and fermentation traditions. Prohibition ended decades ago, but home distillation of spirits remains a federal felony in the United States, with serious penalties. The reason is federal excise tax revenue, plain and simple. Your grandfather understood fermentation as the foundation of food preservation, and the entirely legal practices of making sauerkraut, sourdough, vinegar, cheese, yogurt, beer, wine, mead, and hard cider are among the most nutritious forms of preserved food ever developed. Home brewing of beer and wine is legal at the federal level and in most states. The deeper fermentation knowledge your grandmother carried in her kitchen is still legal, still valuable, and very nearly forgotten. Number 1. Total energy independence as a way of life. This is the principle that connects all the others, and it is the one that has been most thoroughly regulated and replaced. Your great-grandfather's farm ran on sunlight, wood, water, and animal labor. He grew his fuel, his food, his medicine, and his building materials. He owed nothing to a utility company because utility companies barely existed yet. The infrastructure of modern dependency, the grid, the water system, the supply chain, the commercial food network, was built within living memory and sold as progress. It is progress in many ways, but it has also made every household entirely dependent on systems beyond its control, and that trade was not the only choice. Your grandparents knew another way, and pieces of it can still be recovered. The forgetting was profitable for someone every step of the way. As each independent practice was regulated, restricted, or simply replaced by a paid service, an industry grew up around the new dependence. The old ways were branded as backward, primitive, or unsafe, and within a generation or two, Americans who had once done everything for themselves did almost nothing for themselves. The skills did not become illegal everywhere, but they faded from common knowledge until they survive now mostly in a few stubborn communities and a handful of curious learners. Here is your challenge. Pick one. Just one. Set a rain barrel under your downspout this week, where it is legal. Plant a few seeds you can save from. Bake a loaf of sourdough, or try a small batch of sauerkraut. Tell me in the comments which one you'll try, and tell me if your grandparents lived off the grid, because somebody in your family tree knew every trick on this list. That knowledge did not die. It just went quiet. It is time to start listening again.